Have you ever wondered what a day in the life of our earliest ancestors really looked like? Not the epic hunts or dramatic discoveries you've seen in movies, but the ordinary, everyday moments that quietly shaped humanity. How did they wake, eat, move, and survive when there were no clocks, no houses, and no modern conveniences? Today, we'll step back tens of thousands of years to experience a single day as an early human might have lived it. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more fascinating journeys into human history and evolution. Now let's begin. The first signs of morning arrive quietly, long before the sun fully reveals itself. A thin band of pale light spreads across the horizon, and the land begins to shift from darkness into shape. Tall grasses stir as the night air loosens its grip, and distant animals signal the change with low calls and sudden movement. Within a small cluster of bodies resting close together, eyes open not because they are told to, but because the world itself is stirring. There are no boundaries separating rest from wilderness. Rising happens slowly. Stiff limbs stretch, and the group becomes aware of empty stomachs before words are needed. Hunger is not alarming. It is expected, a reliable companion each morning. Attention turns outward almost immediately, scanning the land for signs of opportunity. Some move toward known patches where edible roots and fruits sometimes appear after rain. Others prepare for longer movement, checking the edges of stone tools shaped earlier and carried from place to place. There is no announcement of roles. Each person understands what is needed, because they have lived this pattern since childhood. As they move through the grass, cooperation unfolds without sound. A raised hand slows the group. A glance directs attention to disturbed earth or broken stems. Tools are not possessions but extensions of shared knowledge, stones chosen, shaped, and used with intention, passed down through watching rather than instruction. When food is found, it is handled carefully, tested, and divided without ceremony. Success is modest but enough to keep the day moving forward. Failure, when it happens, is accepted just as calmly. As the sun climbs higher, its heat presses down, changing the rhythm of movement. Activity eases as the group drifts toward a place where trees cast wide shadows. Here, bodies lower themselves to the ground, and the pace of thought slows. This pause is not laziness, it is understanding. Energy is preserved, wounds are tended, and the youngest rest while elders remain alert. Even in stillness, attention never fully fades. The land is watched not with fear, but with respect for its unpredictability. The afternoon brings quiet vigilance. Small signs matter: the sudden silence of birds, the direction of wind, the distant movement of large shapes. Danger is rarely dramatic, but it is always possible. Everyone shares the responsibility of noticing. Knowledge of the land lives in memory, where water collects, where predators pass, where safety can be found if movement becomes necessary. This awareness has been built slowly, day after day, across generations who learned the same lessons. As light softens and lengthens, the group draws inward. Fire is prepared where it has burned before, using embers carefully protected from the night prior. Flames rise, bringing warmth and a sense of boundary against the dark. Around this glow, the day's experiences are acknowledged through gestures, expressions, and repeated motions. Stories are not told as long narratives, but as fragments, reminders of past events, warnings, successes, and losses. Children watch closely, absorbing meaning not from words but from tone and repetition. When darkness fully settles, bodies arrange themselves near the fading fire. The sky returns, vast and familiar, filled with points of light that have watched over countless nights like this one. Sleep comes not as escape, but as continuation. Tomorrow will follow a similar path, shaped by the same needs and the same land, yet always slightly different. Another ordinary day has passed, carrying humanity forward without anyone knowing it. Morning begins with warmth spreading across skin rather than sound. As the sun lifts itself above the edge of the land, eyes open one by one, adjusting to the growing brightness. The ground is cool, marked by footprints and pressed grass from the night before. Young children move first, shifting closer to familiar bodies, drawn by instinct rather than fear. Older members remain still for longer, observing the surroundings before committing to movement. Their role is not command but awareness, shaped by years of noticing what others overlook. The group gathers itself slowly, guided by the simple fact of need. Hunger shapes the day before any decision is made. There is no certainty that food will be found, and this knowledge lingers quietly among them. Some prepare to move farther, adjusting grips on worn tools, while others remain closer to camp, knowing that not every effort requires distance. A small hunting party slips away with measured steps, following paths shaped by animals rather than people. There is no excitement in their departure, only focus. Tracking demands time more than strength. The hunters lower themselves often, studying the ground where hooves or paws have pressed into soft earth. They read signs left behind hours earlier: a bent stem, a scuffed stone, a faint trail where grass has not yet risen. Progress is slow and deliberate. Each step is considered, not because the chase is dramatic, but because haste wastes energy. The possibility of returning empty-handed is always present, and it tempers every movement. Closer to where the day began, others move through familiar terrain, selecting what the land is willing to offer. Roots are loosened carefully, fruits examined for safety, insects collected without judgment. Knowledge guides these choices, built from long observation rather than instruction. What is taken today must not prevent tomorrow. The land is not challenged or controlled, only negotiated with through experience. When food is found, whether through tracking or gathering, it returns to the group without celebration. Distribution happens through habit. The youngest are served first, then those whose bodies no longer move easily, and finally the rest. On days when food is scarce, there is no argument. Hunger is endured together, and the absence of food is treated as part of life rather than failure. Strength is measured not by fullness but by survival through lean moments. Throughout the day, children absorb everything without being addressed directly. They watch hands shape tools, observe which plants are avoided, and note how attention shifts when the land changes tone. There are no lessons given in words. Learning happens through closeness and repetition, through mistakes made small enough to survive. By the time understanding is needed, it already exists. As the sun lowers, movement draws inward again. Bodies cluster closer, responding to the changing light and cooling air. Safety becomes a shared instinct, not discussed but understood. Shelter is chosen carefully, fire tended if it exists, and the group settles into stillness. Night arrives without ceremony, wrapping the land in darkness. Within that darkness, awareness remains, quiet and alert, until sleep claims it. Another day ends, shaped entirely by hunger and the path of the sun. The day begins not with movement, but with assessment. Before anyone rises fully, eyes trace the edges of the clearing, the nearby brush, the distant rise of land, where shadows still linger. Nothing dramatic is expected, yet nothing is ignored. Survival depends on noticing what has changed since nightfall. A scent carried by the wind, disturbed ground, or the absence of usual sounds can signal danger. Only after this quiet examination does the group begin to stir, satisfied that the morning holds no immediate threat. When they move, they follow routes worn into memory rather than the ground itself. These paths are not marked, yet everyone knows them. The safest ways through tall grass, the places where footing is firm, the narrow passages that offer escape if needed. Though the land appears untamed, it is deeply familiar. Each turn and pause reflects knowledge built through countless days that looked much like this one. What may seem repetitive is in truth refinement. The actions that fill the hours are the same ones performed by those who came before. Searching, shaping, carrying, and adjusting fill the day without urgency. There is no sense of monotony, because the routine itself is survival. Each small task carries weight. A stone flaked correctly lasts longer. A tool misplaced may never be replaced. Objects are few, but their value lies in what they enable: food, protection, continuity. Much of the day is spent in movement that appears uneventful. Walking stretches between moments of action. Waiting sharpens attention. Watching teaches patience. These are not empty spaces, but necessary ones. Stillness allows listening. Slow progress prevents mistakes. The land rewards those who do not rush it. In this rhythm, effort is measured carefully against energy, and nothing is wasted. Risk is never dramatic, yet it is always present. A misstep, a wrong decision, or a moment of distraction can separate life from death. This shared vulnerability binds the group more tightly than any spoken agreement. Trust forms not through promises but through consistency. Each person knows the others will respond when needed, because they always have. These bonds are tested daily, strengthened quietly through cooperation rather than conflict. As light fades, attention turns to the place where fire will be kept alive. It is not treated as a marvel, but as something essential and familiar. Flames offer warmth, discourage unseen dangers, and create a center around which the group gathers. The fire's glow softens the edges of the world, making space for rest. Hands move close to its heat, scars and calluses catching the light, evidence of lives shaped by effort. When night settles fully, bodies lower themselves near one another, positioned for both comfort and alertness. Sleep comes lightly, shaped by instinct rather than ease. Even in rest, awareness remains near the surface, ready to rise if needed. Tomorrow will ask for the same attention, the same patience, the same routine. Survival continues not through heroic acts, but through doing these ordinary things well again and again. Life unfolds without accumulation. Nothing is gathered for the sake of keeping, and nothing is held that cannot be carried easily. What endures is not material but mental, an understanding of seasons, animals, plants, and patterns written into memory rather than stored in objects. This knowledge is light enough to move with the group, yet heavy enough to shape every decision. It defines where they go, how long they stay, and when it is time to leave. The few tools that exist are chosen carefully and remain close at hand. They travel with the people who rely on them, shaped to fit a grip, worn smooth through repeated use. When a tool breaks, it is remade if possible or abandoned without hesitation. There is no sense of loss in letting go. Tools serve a moment, not a future imagined far ahead. What matters is usefulness now, not preservation. Food follows the same logic. It is taken when found and shared quickly, never hidden away for later days. The land decides what is available, and the group adapts accordingly. Eating happens when opportunity allows, and hunger returns when it must. This way of living leaves little room for anxiety about tomorrow. Attention remains fixed on the present, where survival is actually negotiated. There are no permanent structures marking ownership or return. Shelter appears where it is needed and disappears just as easily. Branches, hides, and natural formations offer protection for a short time, then are left behind without ceremony. The absence of fixed dwellings makes movement easier, and movement itself becomes a habit rather than a response. Staying too long risks depletion or danger, leaving ensures renewal. Days pass without being counted. Time is not divided into units, but felt through change, light shifting, temperature rising, shadows lengthening. There is no urgency to mark progress or measure age. Life is experienced as a continuous flow rather than a sequence. Memory stretches backward through stories and observation, but the future remains undefined, shaped only by the next need. As the day fades, the group finds itself close again, not by design but by instinct. The same bodies that scattered earlier now gather in familiar proximity. Sharing space offers reassurance in a world that offers little certainty. The absence of possessions leaves room for connection. What one person knows or notices benefits all. When darkness settles, rest comes without separation. The day ends much as it began, grounded in togetherness rather than place. Nothing has been added, nothing stored away. Yet everything necessary has been carried forward. knowledge, trust, and the quiet understanding of how to live lightly within a demanding world. The day unfolds without any sense of importance, yet it is shaped by decisions that quietly matter. Each action, no matter how small, carries weight beyond the moment. A hand hesitates before striking stone, adjusting the angle by instinct rather than calculation. The result is a sharper edge, barely noticeable at first, but easier to use and slower to dull. No one marks this improvement, yet it will influence every task that follows. Such changes slip into daily life unnoticed, accumulating over time. Movement through the land brings constant opportunities for choice. A path is altered slightly to avoid loose ground. A sound in the distance draws attention sooner than it might have before. When danger reveals itself, a warning comes faster, cutting through the air and redirecting the group just in time. No discussion follows. The moment passes, absorbed into memory as another example of what works and what does not. Survival leaves little room for reflection, yet experience is never wasted. Nearby, a child watches everything. There is no formal teaching, only proximity. Small hands mimic the motions they observe, striking stones that chip incorrectly, lifting tools that feel awkward. Failure is part of learning, accepted without correction, unless it becomes dangerous. Over time, movement becomes smoother, decisions quicker, knowledge transfers silently, carried forward not through instruction, but through imitation repeated again and again. Fire remains a steady presence, not as a marvel, but as a responsibility. Embers are guarded carefully, fed when needed, shielded from wind and rain. No one claims credit for its existence. What matters is that it continues. It dries food, warms bodies, and creates a sense of safety after darkness falls. Maintaining it requires attention, and that attention becomes habit. Losing it would mean more effort tomorrow, so it is protected today. As the day progresses, memories form without intention. Successful actions are remembered in the body, not the mind. Hands recall how much force is needed. Eyes recognize patterns in movement and terrain. These memories are not recorded or spoken aloud, yet they persist, shaping future behavior. The past is carried forward through repetition rather than story. When evening arrives, the group settles with the quiet satisfaction of having endured. No achievements are celebrated, no milestones marked. Another cycle has been completed. The day has altered the future in ways no one can see, adding small refinements to how life is lived. Survival itself is the outcome, and that is enough. Humanity moves forward not through grand moments, but through days like this one, ordinary and unremarkable, yet full of consequence. Morning begins in stillness, long before movement overtakes the land. Eyes open not in haste, but with a purpose shaped by anticipation. Decisions have already formed in silence. Which direction to travel, where the ground will be safest, what tasks will take priority. There is no conversation to begin the day. Planning exists as thought woven into every body, each gesture anticipating the next action follows naturally, guided by foresight rather than command. As they move, the land itself becomes a text to be read. Tracks pressed into soft soil, broken stems, and scattered stones all carry meaning. Each footprint tells a story of animals that passed hours ago, where they came from, where they might go, how fast, and in what state. Reading these signs demands patience and focus. Understanding them is not instinct alone, but experience layered over generations. Knowledge accumulates quietly in the minds of those who observe, shaping every step. Hands and fingers know the world intimately. Leaves, roots, and seeds are recognized by touch, weight, and texture rather than sight alone. Plants are not simply food or danger. They are markers of seasons, signals of water, and tools for survival. The ability to discern these differences quickly separates opportunity from misstep. It is a skill passed not by lecture but through proximity. The young mimic motions, feeling what the elders feel, slowly building a sense of what is safe, what is nourishing, what is best left untouched. Strength is measured less in muscle than in coordination and timing. Tasks that could be completed by force are instead accomplished through shared effort. One guides, another lifts, a third steadies, all moving together without instruction. Cooperation outweighs brute effort, because survival depends on harmony more than power. The group moves as one organism, responding to the world collectively, aware that individual might alone cannot meet the challenges of a shifting environment. Knowledge transfers without speech. Hands, eyes, and bodies teach more than words could. A demonstration of how to scrape a stone, lift a root, or secure fire communicates lessons that are remembered through doing rather than repetition. Watching and imitating forms the core of education, silently shaping understanding in the young and reinforcing skill in the experienced. The group functions as a living classroom, its lessons embedded in action and repetition. Fire is neither spectacle nor luxury. It is a shared responsibility, its warmth and smoke woven into the rhythm of the day. Everyone contributes, some tending embers, others adding fuel, all mindful of its fragility and importance. Its presence is a signal of order within the wild, a reminder of the group's collective care. When darkness comes, thought does not cease. Minds replay movements planned for tomorrow and integrate lessons of the day into memory. Dreams are extensions of vigilance and reflection, continuing the quiet work begun at first light. Life is measured in these subtle processes, a network of observation, cooperation, and attention that moves slowly but decisively toward mastery over circumstance. The intelligence of early humans lies not in words but in the depth of these unseen understandings. The day begins without certainty. Light spills over the horizon, revealing a world that offers neither promise nor warning beyond what the senses can detect. Each morning carries the same unknowns as the last, whether food will be found, whether the paths ahead are safe, whether the small signs of animals or weather will be in their favor. No one speaks of these possibilities. They are understood, carried silently by every movement and glance. The unknown is not feared, it is simply present, shaping each decision and step. Hunger is immediate, insistent, and impartial. It drives movement before curiosity or play can intervene. Searching for roots, fruits, or small game occupies hands and eyes, and the body responds instinctively to the need for energy. There is no room for delay. Every choice is weighed against the possibility of empty stomachs. Every motion a negotiation with the land. Hunger is not lamented. It is a quiet motivator, reminding the group that life is contingent on effort and attention. Even as they move, danger is never absent. Predators, weather, or unseen threats exist in the background of every action. They are never front and center, yet they are acknowledged continuously through posture, alert eyes, and the arrangement of bodies within the group. Listening, scanning, and adjusting become habitual. Awareness does not tire, because complacency carries real consequences. Life persists only when vigilance matches need. Trust within the group forms the foundation of movement and decision. Everyone knows that others will act without being told, that warnings will be raised when necessary, and that support will appear in moments of strain or misstep. Cooperation arises from experience rather than instruction. It is embedded in routine. Bonds are strengthened by the shared understanding that each life depends on the reliability of others. Loss occurs with regularity. A missed hunt, a wounded companion, or the disappearance of someone from the group is neither dramatic nor ceremonial. There are no rituals to process grief. Acknowledgement is quiet, almost internal. Survival is measured not in what is mourned, but in what continues. Continuity itself becomes the marker of success. Each small triumph of persistence matters more than any recognition. Evening does not guarantee comfort. Shelter is chosen carefully, fire is protected, and bodies rest with one eye and ear tuned to the night. Sleep is not assumed, it is earned. Only when the body has endured hunger, navigated danger, and maintained vigilance does rest come fully, and even then lightly, because tomorrow will demand the same attention. In this way, Every ordinary day carries the weight of the extraordinary. The simple act of living through it is itself an achievement, shaping knowledge, skill, and the quiet resilience that will carry humanity forward. From the first light of morning, the smallest members of the group are close to adult bodies, carried against warm skin or nestled in simple slings of hide. They move with the rhythm of the day, never abandoned, always observed. Their presence shapes the pace of activity. Steps are measured, hands are careful, and gestures are deliberate. Even before they can walk or speak, these children absorb the patterns of survival, learning not through instruction, but through constant proximity to action. Observation is the earliest form of education. Small hands mimic motions, eyes follow repeated gestures, and curiosity guides tentative experimentation. A child crouches beside an elder, shaping a tool, touching the edge, feeling the balance and resistance, and learning its potential without needing words. Every motion is a lesson, every mistake a safe opportunity to understand cause and effect. Knowledge is transferred quietly, woven into the daily rhythm rather than formalized in speech. Play mirrors the serious tasks of survival. Children dig in the soil, lift stones, and move sticks in imitation of hunting or building. Even laughter and tumbling carry instruction, understanding weight, timing, and coordination, refining motor skills that will later be essential for gathering, carrying, or defending. What looks like amusement is preparation. The games of youth are practice for the realities of adult life. Elders guide subtly. A hand adjusts posture. A gaze directs attention. A slow demonstration reveals technique. Nothing is demanded or corrected harshly. The young are encouraged to repeat, to explore, and to internalize lessons at their own pace. The wisdom of age flows not in command but in example. Through these silent interventions, children absorb not only skill but also values, patience, awareness, and respect for the land and the group. Food distribution reinforces this hierarchy of care. The youngest are fed first, their needs anticipated before those of others. This is not indulgence, but recognition of vulnerability and investment in the future. They learn the importance of sharing, of responsibility, and the implicit trust that the group will provide protection and sustenance. Hunger is managed collectively, and the rhythm of giving teaches balance and empathy. When evening arrives, the group gathers around the fire, and the youngest settle close. Shadows flicker across faces, and stories are enacted more than spoken, gestures and sounds carrying meaning that is absorbed naturally. Tales of hunts, close calls, and past successes are repeated not for entertainment alone, but to anchor identity. Children learn where they belong, how the group functions, and what it means to live within this shared world. As night deepens, bodies curl near one another, and the youngest fall asleep to warmth, motion, and subtle narrative rhythms. Through observation, play, and gentle guidance, they have absorbed the essential patterns of life. Each ordinary day passes as both practice and inheritance, ensuring that the knowledge, skills, and identity of the group are carried forward into the next generation. Light shifts over the horizon, and the day begins not with a voice or bell, but with the rising sun itself. Its early rays touch the faces of those who have slept under open skies, signaling the start of activity. Eyes adjust to the brightness, and bodies rise in response to the subtle cues of warmth and illumination. There is no schedule imposed, no abstract measure of hours. Time is defined entirely by the movement of the sun and the changing patterns of light across the land. As the sun climbs, heat becomes a silent regulator. Activity slows in its intensity, and bodies seek shade where it is offered. Rest is dictated not by desire, but by necessity. The ground, the breeze, and the open sky shape the rhythm of labor. Those who ignore the signals of the natural world risk exhaustion or misstep. Even the most urgent tasks are tempered by the awareness that energy is finite and must be conserved according to environmental cues. Shadows govern decisions as much as sunlight. The position of trees, rocks, and hills signals where movement is safest, where the ground is firmest, and when the heat will become oppressive. Choices are made in relation to these shifting markers. A place that offers shelter in the morning may become unbearably hot by noon. Awareness of these patterns allows for efficient travel, hunting and gathering, ensuring that effort aligns with the demands of the environment rather than against it. Seasons impose a longer-term order on the day. Rainfall, flowering, migration, and temperature dictate where the group can move and what sustenance is available. Water must be found, game followed, and plants collected at the appropriate moment. Life is a negotiation with these cycles. Preparation for change is built into the daily routine, even if the group does not name the months or mark the passage of time formally. Adaptation is constant, and planning is informed by careful observation rather than prediction. Control is an illusion, and the group lives in quiet acceptance of this reality. The land cannot be commanded, the weather cannot be altered, and wild animals cannot be restrained. Instead, the day is structured around flexibility, moving when needed, pausing when prudent, and taking advantage of every opportunity without forcing it. Success is measured by endurance and responsiveness, not by imposing will upon the environment. Nightfall arrives as both signal and caution. Darkness announces a pause in activity, a time to gather close, and an occasion for vigilance. It marks safety in proximity to fire or shelter, yet danger in what cannot be seen. The group adjusts instinctively, finding warmth and security while remaining alert. Sleep becomes an act of trust in the shared knowledge that survival depends on understanding and responding to the cycles that govern all life. In a world ruled entirely by nature's clock, every movement, every pause, and every choice is a reflection of the quiet authority of the sun, the heat, the shadows, and the unyielding march of the seasons. Morning opens as it always has, with pale light spilling across familiar terrain. The same contours of earth, the same rising shapes of hills and trees, greet eyes that have seen countless dawns like this one. Movements are predictable yet precise. Bodies stretch, awaken, and gather without instruction, repeating gestures that have been performed for generations. To an outsider, it may seem monotonous, but each motion carries the quiet weight of survival honed over lifetimes. The work of the day unfolds with subtle variation. Stones are shaped a fraction more efficiently, fire is coaxed with slightly better technique, traps are set with attention informed by years of observation. Each small refinement seems minor in the moment, almost imperceptible, yet these incremental improvements accumulate, carrying forward wisdom that is never formally recorded. In this way, knowledge grows slowly, almost invisibly, embedded in hands, eyes, and memory. Life is measured in repetition rather than innovation. There is no concept of progress in the abstract. Each generation experiences the day as it comes, expecting the rhythm to continue and relying on patterns observed from those who came before. Awareness of history or achievement does not guide behavior. Instead, repetition itself secures continuity. By acting consistently, humans shape their world and adapt to it, even without reflection or conscious ambition. Movement, foraging, hunting, and tending to fire occupy hours that stretch without variation in form, but not in detail. Every choice made today has echoes of countless prior days. The land and its resources are known intimately, and responses to its challenges are guided by instincts refined over uncounted iterations of this same day. Survival does not rely on sudden brilliance, but on consistent engagement and careful observation repeated endlessly. Children imitate adults as they have for millennia, unaware of the lineage of behavior they inherit. The young absorb skill and awareness naturally, carrying forward patterns that will themselves become ordinary to the next generation. Humanity is forming in this repetition, not through dramatic events, but through small, continuous acts of adaptation, cooperation, and endurance. Evening draws the group together in familiar spaces. Fire is maintained, food shared, bodies rested. The sky darkens in patterns that have been the same for ages. Tomorrow is assumed, expected, but never guaranteed. Each night ends with both continuity and uncertainty, with sleep earned only by attentiveness and care. Through these cycles, one day blends into the next. What seems ordinary, even repetitive, is the foundation upon which humanity is built. Civilization has not yet been imagined, yet the careful, uncelebrated actions of countless days shape the mind, the body, and the social bonds that will carry humans forward. Life continues, persistent and unnoticed, each day both like the last and subtly different. Long before warmth could be summoned at will, the land shaped human lives with indifference and force. The world was wide, raw, and unsoftened by any sense of safety. Wind crossed open plains without obstruction, cutting through skin and thin coverings made from scavenged hides. Stone outcrops and twisted trees offered little shelter, and even these places could not be trusted. Every sound carried meaning. Every shadow suggested movement. To exist in this landscape was to remain alert, because stillness often meant death. Humans were not rulers of this world. They were small groups moving cautiously through territories already claimed by stronger, faster, and better armed creatures. Their bodies bore no natural weapons. Claws were replaced by fingers, fangs by blunt teeth. Speed was limited, strength uncertain. Survival depended on awareness rather than dominance. Eyes scanned constantly. Ears listened for the slightest shift in grass or stone. A snapped twig could end a life, not because of the sound itself, but because of what it might announce. Cold defined the rhythm of existence. During daylight, movement was possible. The sun offered not comfort but opportunity. It allowed visibility, a chance to see danger before it struck. Hunting and gathering happened quickly and cautiously, never far from a route of escape. Food was never abundant, only briefly secured. A successful kill brought relief, not celebration, because blood carried scent, and scent carried attention. The living shared the land with those always ready to take. Night transformed the world into something else entirely. As the light faded, familiar shapes dissolved into uncertainty. The horizon disappeared. Distance lost meaning. Darkness belonged to others. Eyes reflected faint starlight. Breathing sounded closer than it should. The air itself seemed to move with intention. Humans withdrew into silence, pressing close together, not for warmth alone, but to reduce the chance of being noticed. Even then, sleep came in fragments. Rest was shallow, interrupted by instinct and fear. Luck played a role larger than skill. A sudden storm could scatter predators, or it could drive them closer. A missed sound might mean nothing, or it might mean everything. Children learned early to stay quiet, to watch faces rather than ask questions. The old carried knowledge earned through survival, not comfort. Which paths were safer? Which times were worse? Which places were never to be returned to? These lessons were not spoken often, but they were understood. The land itself seemed to hunt. Ice crept into bones. Hunger sharpened tempers and dulled judgment. Injury rarely healed cleanly. Even small wounds could decide a fate over days. There was no sense of future beyond the next sunrise. Planning was limited to survival through the coming hours. The idea of control over nature had no meaning. Nature was not something to master. It was something to endure. In this world, human life existed in a narrow space between chance and caution. The group mattered because isolation meant vulnerability. Yet even together, they were never secure. They moved, always aware that staying too long invited discovery. Camps were temporary. Footprints were erased when possible. Nothing was built to last because nothing was expected to. And beneath all of this, unspoken but constant, was tension. Not panic, not despair, but a steady pressure that shaped every decision. A sense that something unseen held power over every breath. That survival was borrowed, not owned. The world had rules, and humans had not written them. This was existence before change, before protection, before light could be carried. A time when darkness decided everything and humanity waited, without knowing it, on the edge of a moment that would fracture this balance forever. The change did not arrive gently, nor did it announce itself with purpose. It came as disruption, sudden and violent, tearing through the familiar order of fear. The sky split open without warning, and sound followed light so intense it seemed to strike the ground itself. The air burned with a sharp, unfamiliar scent. Somewhere beyond the edge of sight, the land ignited. What had once been darkness became movement and colour, leaping and alive. At first, distance kept it tolerable. From far away, the brightness pulsed against the night like something alive but contained. Animals reacted before humans did. The usual patterns broke. Predators fled, confused by a force that did not behave like prey. The ground crackled. Trees shed sparks. Heat rolled outward in waves that could be felt long before they could be understood. Instinct demanded retreat. Everything in the human body recognized danger. Yet something interrupted that instinct. The absence of pursuit. The unfamiliar quiet that followed the chaos. Where fear once pressed close, there was now space. The glowing edge of destruction created a boundary no living thing crossed. From behind rocks and earth, eyes watched. No teeth flashed. No shapes moved through the dark toward them. The fire stood alone. Caution turned into hesitation. Hesitation into observation. The flames shifted constantly, never still, yet bound to the ground in a way animals were not. They consumed what lay in their path, but slowly, predictably. Embers scattered, fading as they landed. Smoke rose and vanished into the sky. This was not a hunter. It did not stalk. It did not chase. When the violence of the blaze weakened, what remained was smaller, quieter, and strangely inviting. A fallen branch burned at one end, its glow steady. The surrounding earth was warm, not hostile. One figure stepped closer than the rest, then stopped. The heat pushed back, but it did not strike. Another step followed, breath held, muscles ready to run. Nothing happened. The light revealed more than danger. It revealed detail. Hands became visible. Faces emerged from shadow. The ground took shape again. Fear loosened its grip just enough to allow curiosity through. The branch crackled softly, breaking apart but not exploding. When it fell, it left behind glowing fragments that lingered instead of disappearing. A hand reached toward the warmth and pulled back quickly, startled but unharmed. Pain existed, but it was immediate and instructive, not fatal. This thing warned before it punished. That alone made it different. Stones placed near it grew hot. Cold retreated in its presence. The night no longer swallowed everything whole. Someone moved a fragment with a stick. It responded, shifting its glow without resistance. The realization was not sudden or verbal. It formed slowly, across repeated moments of approach and retreat. This force did not act on its own terms alone. It responded. It could be guided, fed, diminished. Fear did not vanish. It transformed. What stood before them was powerful, capable of destruction beyond any creature they knew. But it was also consistent. It followed rules, and rules could be learned. The moment was fragile. One wrong movement could have ended it, but it did not. Instead, the fire remained. Watched, tested, accepted at a distance. In that silent exchange, something shifted in the human mind. For the first time, a force of nature had not only been survived, but approached. Not conquered, but engaged. Without ceremony or awareness of its weight, the world tilted. The darkness no longer held complete authority. A new presence had entered human life, and it would not leave. The fragile glow became the center of attention, fragile yet commanding, as if the night itself had been replaced by something to be treasured rather than feared. Sparks were collected with care, carried in hollowed bark or stone hollows, guarded as though they were living creatures. The warmth was no longer a gift of chance. It became responsibility. Whoever held it held more than light. They held life. Every ember was precious, capable of sustaining or abandoning a group depending on its survival. The task of protection fell unevenly across the small bands. Some kept vigil at night, eyes never leaving the glow, bodies tense yet deliberate. Others carried embers during movement, shielding them from wind, rain, and careless accident. Even the young learned the rituals, how to approach without startling, how to breathe without scattering heat or ash, how to feed the flames with small sticks that would burn slowly rather than rage unpredictably. It became a rhythm of life, a constant attention that demanded both patience and precision. Loss brought sudden despair. A dropped ember in the darkness could mean hours of shivering and fear, the return of hunted nights where every step might be the last. The group would gather frantically, searching the ground, coaxing what little glow remained back to life. Smoke alone became a signal of disaster. The absence of fire transformed the familiar landscape into a hostile alien place, and the creatures that prowled it seemed to sense the vulnerability immediately. Hunger was terrible, but cold without warmth was devastating. Soon the fire's value outstripped even food. A small preserved ember could sustain a group longer than a handful of roots or a scavenged carcass. Decisions shifted. Foraging was tempered by the need to protect the flame. Night movement was limited. Arguments arose, tempered quickly by the shared understanding that no dispute could justify the risk of losing it. The fire dictated schedules, routines, and attention, reshaping human behavior in ways invisible to outsiders. Even as fire spread to multiple points, each glowing fragment demanded care. Rival groups might covet an ember, not merely for survival, but for the dominance it represented. Protection became a matter of both pride and necessity. Strategies emerged. Multiple carriers, layered defences, observation posts. Some of the cleverest among them found ways to shelter fire with earth and stone, or to keep small fragments smouldering beneath leaves, hidden from sight yet ready to burst back into life. Gradually a new hierarchy formed around the flame. Those who understood its temperament, who could coax it from weakness and sustain it through wind or dampness, gained respect. Knowledge became power, which twigs burned longest, how to reignite embers from ash, how to prevent its escape into the night. This expertise was as vital as the skill of hunting or tracking. The group depended upon it, and dependence bred reverence. The fire itself seemed to respond to human care, feeding on attention and creating comfort in return. Its warmth extended bodies, allowing more movement after dusk. Shadows no longer consumed the camp. Humans discovered a sense of timing that had not existed. Moments to rest, to cook, to watch and plan. It was a new dimension of control, yet delicate. One error, a dropped log, an unshielded ember, could erase everything in an instant. In these moments, humans began to see themselves not only as creatures of the land, but as stewards of a force more potent than any hunted prey. The flame became the measure of their ingenuity, patience, and courage. Its survival was more urgent than any meal, its guidance more reliable than the stars. In guarding fire, humans first felt what it was to hold power, both terrifying and sustaining, fragile and enduring, a gift that demanded vigilance yet promised dominion. For the first time, darkness no longer held unquestioned authority. The glow of fire pushed back the night, and with it came a strange new sense of safety. Predators, once relentless and unseen, kept their distance. The low murmur of distant claws or the rustle of leaves no longer made hearts pound with immediate dread. Even the sharpest ears could relax, if only slightly, as the warmth created a barrier that life could depend upon. Shadows were still present, but they were no longer all-consuming. They had edges, boundaries defined by light. Human groups began to linger where fire was maintained. Camps, once temporary shelters, started to feel permanent. Stones and sticks were arranged with purpose, not only to hold tents or lean-together shelters, but also to frame the fire in ways that extended its protection. Paths within the camp became habitual. Certain spots were designated for the flame itself, a sacred circle of light that defined the heart of the group. The perimeter of safety grew outward from that centre, and within it people dared to relax, to stretch, to breathe without constant tension. Sleep itself began to change. Where once it was a fragmented and vigilant practice, rest now extended through longer stretches of darkness. The mind, free from the immediate terror of predators, began to wander into other thoughts. Memories, plans, stories. The safety that fire provided allowed imagination to flourish. Human consciousness, no longer entirely consumed by survival, began to consider the past and the future simultaneously. Dreams became less about fleeing and more about wonder, about the group's shared experiences, and about questions yet unasked. The emotional world shifted quietly but profoundly. Fire introduced a spectrum of feelings that had been inaccessible before. Relief, curiosity, admiration, even playfulness emerged in response to the light and warmth. Laughter, once rare and brief, began to echo around the flames, bonds tightened. The group's cohesion grew not only out of necessity, but from mutual recognition of the comfort that fire enabled. Discussions about hunts, tools, or territory now carried warmth and attention that extended beyond immediate survival. The glow also offered a mirror to human expression. Faces illuminated in firelight became familiar and reassuring rather than threatening. Gestures and glances could be read with subtlety. A child learning to imitate an elder could now be observed safely. Instructions for daily tasks became more precise, more deliberate. Knowledge that once depended solely on repeated trials in daylight could now be passed during the night. The accumulation of skills accelerated because the mind and senses had more time and less fear to devote to learning. Even the perception of distance transformed. Where darkness once erased boundaries and made the world unpredictable, fire drew circles of clarity. Danger was no longer infinite. It was segmented, comprehensible, and contained. Humans felt agency for the first time. They could influence the night. They could push back against uncertainty. They could carve spaces where life continued uninterrupted. In this way, fire did more than illuminate. It reshaped the interior landscape of human experience. Courage and confidence began to emerge, faint but persistent. Emotional resilience developed alongside physical adaptation. The night, long a realm of terror and unpredictability, became a canvas upon which humans could project not only caution but creativity, strategy, and care. By holding fire, humans discovered a new form of power, one that did not demand conquest over nature through force, but rather negotiation, stewardship, and understanding. A single flame had the authority to redefine the relationship between life and night, transforming fear into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and connection. In this glow, humanity first glimpsed the potential of shaping the world to meet its own needs, rather than existing solely at its mercy. The discovery of fire's warmth brought more than safety. It brought transformation in the body itself. Food, once consumed raw and coarse, became malleable under heat. Roots, tubers, and tough fibers softened, breaking down in ways that hands alone could not achieve. Meat released flavors and textures previously inaccessible, and its toughness yielded to careful roasting. The act of cooking was not merely convenience, it was a form of alchemy, turning the same ingredients into something richer, more nourishing, more digestible. Teeth, once large and robust for tearing raw plants and meat, began to lose some of their defensive purpose. Jaws, previously wide and strong to crush hard food, grew less massive over generations as cooking reduced the labor required to chew. Bones that had endured constant strain now experienced relief, and muscles adapted to a new rhythm of consumption. Digestion became more efficient. Fewer calories were wasted on breaking down raw cellulose or sinew. Nutrients once locked within tough fibers became available in abundance. The brain, demanding as it was, responded to this newfound energy. Previously constrained by limited caloric intake, early humans now had a resource that allowed cognition to expand. Problem-solving sharpened, planning grew more elaborate, and attention spans lengthened. The same fire that protected life now nurtured intellect, quietly offering a foundation for thought that went beyond mere survival. Nights could be spent observing patterns, crafting tools, or discussing the world around the fire. Learning, memory, and strategy all gained momentum alongside improved nutrition. Cooking also changed behavior in subtle but profound ways. Meals became communal rituals, occasions for sharing warmth, conversation, and care. Social bonds strengthened as individuals learned to coordinate the preparation of food, distribute portions, and monitor the fire's intensity. The body and mind, both fueled and sustained by cooked nourishment, enabled humans to invest energy in teaching, storytelling, and planning future hunts. Fire became a partner in development, influencing growth at every level, from physiology to social structure. Energy once reserved for mere survival was now available for exploration and creativity. Muscles that had labored to break down raw food could now redirect effort toward mobility, tool-making, and construction. The body grew leaner in some ways, more efficient in others, reflecting the quiet but profound influence of controlled heat. Fire did not simply alter the present, it reshaped the potential for generations to come, a subtle architect of evolution in action. Even digestion became a site of adaptation. The gut, previously strained by raw fibers and resistant proteins, grew more specialized in extracting maximum nutrition. Illness caused by spoiled or hard-to-process food diminished. Fat reserves, previously a precarious necessity, became easier to maintain. The human body began to feel more capable, stronger in its endurance, and lighter in its capacity to explore the world. With each meal cooked over fire, the mind and body became entwined with its rhythms. Humans learned to time food preparation with the cycles of day and night, to preserve embers for warmth and cooking, and to coordinate labour around the needs of the flame. Fire became as integral to survival as water or shelter, but also as central to the evolution of human potential. By transforming raw sustenance into nourishment, fire reshaped the very architecture of life. Teeth and jaws yielded, digestion strengthened, and the brain, ever hungry for fuel, received the resources to grow in ways that would eventually make language, planning, and art possible. In the quiet glow of embers, the human body was being rewritten, imperceptibly but irreversibly, heralding a new era in which the mastery of fire became mastery of the self. The glow of fire drew people closer than any necessity alone could demand. After the tasks of the day, when hunting and gathering had ended and the cold began to bite, humans clustered around the flames, forming a circle that felt both intimate and protective. Shadows danced across faces, highlighting expressions in a way that daylight rarely did, and eyes met more often, lingering on subtle gestures that conveyed meaning beyond simple words or sounds. The fire became a focal point, holding attention and offering a shared space for observation and exchange. Conversations lengthened in the presence of warmth. Stories of the day, what had been hunted, what had been lost, what had frightened the group, were repeated and elaborated upon. Each account became richer as others added details, mimed actions, or reacted with laughter or alarm. Language, tentative and fragmented, gained momentum. Repetition taught structure, gestures emphasized meaning, and the fire's glow ensured that everyone remained attentive. Even silence carried purpose. Eyes and hands spoke when words could not, and every nuance became part of the shared understanding. The day no longer ended with dusk. Fire extended waking hours into the deep night, transforming time itself. With light available after the sun had disappeared, humans could reflect on their experiences, plan for the next day, and teach younger members more effectively. Lessons about tools, hunting strategies, or safe paths could now be given under the steady glow, without the pressure of the immediate survival pressing in. This extension of activity created room for subtlety, for complex expression, for the beginnings of syntax and nuance that might otherwise have remained impossible. Fire also encouraged repetition, experimentation, and memory. Words were tested, sounds were repeated, gestures became standardized. The presence of warmth reduced fear, allowing minds to focus on social cohesion and instruction rather than mere survival. Early stories became scaffolds for language itself, offering structure to ideas that had previously existed only in immediate necessity. Humor, warning, explanation, and imitation were all possible because the circle offered both safety and attention, a contained environment in which communication could flourish. Emotion intertwined with speech. Faces illuminated by fire showed concern, amusement, curiosity, and awe in ways that strengthened understanding. Vocalizations paired with gestures became increasingly precise. Subtle differences in tone began to carry meaning. The group learned to recognize patterns in sound, associating them with people, objects, or actions. This shared cognition, reinforced nightly around the fire, laid the foundation for memory, abstract thought, and cooperation beyond immediate tasks. Stories of past hunts, imagined dangers, and explanations of natural phenomena circulated, building a communal knowledge that could be carried forward. As the circle grew more habitual, humans began to anticipate sequences, beginnings, climaxes, resolutions. Language gained rhythm and order. The fire not only illuminated faces, but illuminated thought itself, giving rise to structured expression that extended beyond immediate survival. The circle fostered attention and social learning. Younger members imitated older ones, absorbing gestures, sounds, and expressions. Repetition around the flame created patterns in mind and voice, reinforcing the memory and comprehension. Debate, persuasion, and narrative experimentation became possible, creating fertile ground for language to take root and flourish. In this way, fire became the midwife of communication. It provided time, light, and safety, allowing humans to transform fleeting sounds into shared meaning. It was more than warmth or protection. It was a teacher, shaping the way early humans could connect, plan, and imagine. In the quiet pulse of the fire circle, the first sparks of language ignited, linking minds together and opening a path toward thought, culture, and civilization. Fire's role evolved from refuge to tool, a force that could be wielded rather than merely tended. Humans discovered that controlled flames could alter the environment itself, shaping the movements of animals and the availability of resources. Grasses, underbrush, and scattered wood were burned deliberately, creating barriers and funnels. Herds, startled by the sudden light and heat, fled predictably along paths humans had observed and sometimes even directed. The same force that once protected humans now became a way to manipulate the world around them. Hunting strategies transformed. Ambushes no longer relied solely on stealth and patience. Fire could drive animals toward prepared positions, limiting their options and increasing human success. Hunters coordinated actions around the glow, tracking smoke patterns and listening to the reactions of prey. The landscape became a partner in predation, reshaped moment by the interplay of flame and human ingenuity. Success did not come from brute strength alone, but from understanding and guiding the fire's effect on both the land and its inhabitants. Humans began to recognize their growing influence over entire ecosystems. Burned patches encouraged new growth of plants, favored for food or shelter. Predators found their hunting grounds altered and less reliable. Fire became a tool of control, extending human presence and influence far beyond the immediate circle of the camp. Observation, experimentation, and planning merged, allowing early humans to anticipate natural responses to their actions. They were no longer entirely at the mercy of the world. They were beginning to bend it to their needs. The mastery of fire as a weapon also demanded new levels of cooperation. Coordinating burns, protecting the advancing flames, and timing hunts required communication and careful strategy. Mistakes could be catastrophic. Fire could rage beyond control, consume resources, or harm the hunters themselves. But when wielded successfully, it amplified their capabilities, giving them advantages that no other creature possessed. Humans learned to measure, guide, and respect the force they commanded, recognizing both its potential and its danger. This shift marked a profound change in perspective. Once the hunted, humans now understood the possibility of becoming the hunters in a larger, more deliberate sense. Knowledge of terrain, animal behavior, and fire's power merged to create a level of dominance unprecedented in their history. The landscape itself was no longer simply a backdrop. It became a canvas for strategy, manipulation, and sustained advantage. Over time, repeated use of fire in hunting reshaped migration patterns and ecological balances. Certain animals avoided burned areas, while new plant growth encouraged others to settle. Humans began to influence the succession of species in the regions they occupied. The flame that had first offered safety was now a force with the capacity to alter life itself, an early step in humanity's ongoing reshaping of the planet. With fire, humans could extend influence across time and space. A single well-placed blaze could determine the movements of a herd for days or even weeks. It could change the composition of a forest or grassland. The combination of intellect, observation, and controlled heat elevated humans from reactive participants in nature to proactive agents. For the first time, they had a means to impose strategy over chaos. In this transformation, humans glimpsed the power of foresight and planning at scale. Fire as a weapon was more than a tool for immediate survival. It was the instrument by which they began to assert their presence over the world, laying the foundation for civilizations yet to come. The balance of predator and prey had shifted, and with it, the trajectory of human destiny began to bend in ways no creature had anticipated. Fire became a companion on journeys that would have been impossible without its steady warmth. As humans ventured beyond familiar lands, they encountered cold winds that cut through skin and bone, snow that blanketed the earth in blinding white, and nights that seemed endless. The same embers that had illuminated camps now offered protection against frost, allowing travel and survival in climates that had once been barriers to expansion. With fire, humans could endure cold nights, dry damp hides, and maintain life where raw exposure would have meant certain death. Migration beyond Africa brought humans into landscapes starkly different from the warmth of their origins. Mountains, tundras, and glaciers demanded adaptation on every level. Food sources were scattered and scarce, shelter was minimal, and weather was unpredictable. Fire became the center around which survival strategies coalesced. It provided heat for cooking, which ensured maximum energy from limited food. It allowed people to stay awake longer, tending to young, scouting the area, and preparing shelters before darkness could overtake them. The flame extended the day and created a buffer between life and death. Clothing and shelters transformed alongside fire. Animal hides were softened over the embers, stitched and layered to preserve warmth. Tents and rudimentary structures were reinforced and insulated with knowledge of how heat circulated, how smoke exited, and how embers could be preserved. Even temporary shelters became functional living spaces, centered on the glow that defined safe ground. Groups learned to carry embers carefully, maintaining warmth during travel and using the flame as a symbol of continuity in an otherwise hostile environment. Fire acted as a passport, enabling humans to enter regions that had previously been off-limits. Rivers frozen over could be crossed with warmth preserved at night. Valleys blanketed in snow could be explored safely. Cliffs and plateaus once unapproachable became manageable through careful placement of fire and human ingenuity. With it, they brought light, heat, and nourishment to the edges of the world. In every new land, fire established the foundation for life, permitting not only survival but growth and exploration. The presence of fire also altered social structures during migration. Groups needed coordination to transport embers, feed flames, and protect against accidental loss. Leadership and cooperation emerged, guided by the understanding that the survival of all depended on careful attention to the same fragile resource. Fire became a central node of planning, a constant in an otherwise unpredictable journey. Without it, the cold could have fractured groups and scattered populations. With it, humans moved confidently, leaving traces of warmth wherever they travelled. The ability to maintain fire across distances also encouraged cultural continuity. Knowledge of techniques, strategies, and survival practices was preserved and shared, becoming portable intelligence that travelled with the group. Skills honed in one climate could be adapted for another. The flame became both practical and symbolic, a tether to past experience and a beacon guiding future possibilities. In this way, fire transformed migration from mere movement into conquest of new worlds. Humans were no longer confined to temperate zones, or reliant solely on natural shelters. They carried life itself in their hands, a portable essence that made even the coldest, harshest regions habitable. Fire extended the reach of human ambition and curiosity, creating a pathway across deserts, mountains, and frozen plains. The world, vast and unwelcoming, became accessible, and humans, once limited by climate, were free to spread across the entire Earth. Through warmth and light, fire enabled a new era of exploration. It was the invisible passport that allowed humans to inhabit icy realms, adapt to new challenges, and extend their presence far beyond the cradle of their origin. Wherever the flame travelled, survival followed, and with survival came the first glimmers of permanence in places that had once been uninhabitable. Fire was no longer just a tool, it was the key to a boundless world. Fire, while a source of warmth and sustenance, was never benign. Its glow could comfort, but its rage could destroy. A careless ember could ignite grasslands, forests, or entire camps. Sparks that escaped vigilance sometimes roared into roaring flames, consuming food stores, shelters, and even lives. Early humans quickly learned that fire was unpredictable, and the cost of mismanagement was immediate and severe. Each incident left lasting impressions, teaching lessons etched into memory. Survival depended not only on knowing fire, but on respecting its limits. Communities began to recognize that fire required rules. It could not be tended haphazardly. Responsibilities were assigned, sometimes formally, sometimes by unspoken consensus. One person maintained the central flame, another monitored the edges, while others collected fuel. Night watches became essential. Accidents could no longer be shrugged off. Negligence meant devastation. The group's safety, their warmth, and their sustenance were entwined with the care given to the flame. Early humans were forced to develop discipline in ways that extended far beyond fire itself. With each controlled blaze, understanding grew. People learned to anticipate behavior, which materials burned fastest, how wind could spread flames, and how embers could be preserved through damp or cold. Knowledge became power, and power demanded responsibility. The consequences of misuse were immediate and stark: scorched land, lost resources, and weakened communities. Each mistake reinforced the lesson that power, though desirable, was not without cost. Humans came to realize that even their greatest ally could become their greatest threat. Fire's dual nature shaped the development of decision-making and foresight. Survival was no longer a matter of reacting alone, it became a matter of planning, judgment, and caution. Groups had to coordinate in fuel collection, placement of fires, and safeguarding against natural hazards. A lapse in judgment could lead to destruction, yet careful guidance could transform fire into a tool of unparalleled utility. This delicate balance fostered an early understanding of ethics, responsibility, and the consequences of one's actions. The very experience of danger also taught respect. Flames could be mesmerizing, but awe mixed with fear kept hubris in check. Overconfidence led to disasters. Humility encouraged careful observation and patience. Fire became both teacher and test, revealing character through the way people responded to its demands. Those who ignored its temperament learned quickly, often painfully, that mastery required vigilance and respect. In parallel, humans began to internalize the broader lesson. Every act of power carries consequence. The management of fire mirrored larger truths about influence over the environment, social dynamics, and survival itself. Decisions that affected the flame affected the group. The ripple of care or neglect extended outward, shaping not only immediate safety but future opportunities for exploration, sustenance, and growth. Through trial, error, and attentive observation, early humans began to establish patterns and protocols, creating the first systems of control. Fire was no longer a random force of nature but a shared responsibility, an extension of human agency. It demanded attention, judgment, and restraint, forcing groups to develop coordination, planning, and foresight. In learning to live with fire's destructive potential, humanity encountered the essential truth of power. It could create, but it could also annihilate. The gift of fire was immense, yet it was not free. Through fire, humans first confronted the notion that control brings both opportunity and obligation, and that mastery comes with consequences that cannot be ignored. This dangerous gift, held carefully and respected, became the foundation for the first lessons in human responsibility, foresight, and the ethical dimensions of power. The fire that once flickered in fragile embers at the center of a small human circle now stretches across the world in forms both familiar and unimaginable. From the earliest campfires to the blazing furnaces that smelt metals, from the engines that propel ships and trains to the lights that brighten cities, fire remains at the core of human achievement. It has become both symbol and instrument, a constant companion in the shaping of societies and the expansion of knowledge. Its presence is felt in every hearth, every factory, and every flickering bulb that illuminates the night. Civilization itself is built upon fire's enduring power. It enabled agriculture, metallurgy, and industry. It transformed simple shelters into homes and villages into sprawling cities. Fire provided the energy to forge tools, craft art, and construct structures that outlasted generations. It catalyzed trade, technology, and invention, each advancement tracing a line back to those first careful embers carried by cautious hands. Humanity learned not only to survive with fire, but to rely upon it, to integrate it into daily life in ways that would have seemed miraculous to their ancestors. Yet fire's power is dual, capable of creation and destruction alike. It warms bodies and cooks food, but it also fuels engines of war and spreads devastation when misused. Entire landscapes have been reshaped, and civilizations have risen or fallen depending on the management or mismanagement of flame. The same element that permitted early humans to extend nights of safety and exploration now powers modern machines, furnishes heat to homes, and provides light to cities that never sleep. Its influence extends from the most intimate spaces to global systems, a reminder that mastery brings both progress and responsibility. Through all these transformations, the essence of fire remains unchanged. Its unpredictability demands attention, its energy offers opportunity. Humans have learned to guide it, contain it, and harness it in ways unimaginable to those who first approached a glowing ember in the dark. Yet even as technology has advanced, the origin of this power remains humble, a spark discovered, tended, and respected in the quiet of a prehistoric night. Every modern flame, every burst of light or heat, carries the memory of that first interaction between human curiosity and natural force. The story of fire is also the story of humanity itself. With it, humans shifted from prey to predator, from wanderers to settlers, from creatures of instinct to architects of civilization. It taught lessons about caution, cooperation, and foresight. It offered warmth and nourishment, reshaping bodies and minds alike. It fostered language, social bonds, and knowledge that could be carried across generations. In fire, humans discovered a force that reflected their own potential, powerful, transformative, and demanding of respect. Even now, every flicker of flame, every glowing coil of electricity, every controlled explosion in industry or transport is a descendant of that original light. It reminds us that all human achievement, all progress, and all civilization stems from a moment when a small group of humans first dared to approach, to protect, and to understand the fire that would redefine their existence. The flame still burns, not merely in hearths or engines, but in the heart of human ingenuity, curiosity, and ambition. It is the thread that connects our present to our distant past, the eternal witness to a journey that began with a spark and continues to illuminate the path of human destiny.